right, it is time to begin. Thank you so much for being here on today's CAS Assessor training. I know it's a challenge to put an hour aside in the work that you get to do, and I am always appreciative of that effort. As you know, and I've said multiple times through our trainings together, when we put this time aside, learn new skills, refresh our skills, the intention is always to build our capacity together so that we can resolve homelessness. For those of you that this is the first time you're on one of our trainings, my name is Jody Weiner. I am the Learning and Development Specialist. And today I'm sitting in a different seat. I just want to share my background prior to coming to SSF was I have been a trauma educator for over 15 years. So today's training is near and dear to my heart. I will be your presenter as well as the usual background. It's me, y'all. So I did want to just give you some basics before we begin. As you know, we've got our usual housekeeping. And of course, we've got our tech to work with as well. So I will appreciate the grace and patience that you provide. Usually there's several people on these trainings, and today it's me. So we'll begin, and today's training is number 5 of our 6-part series in our CAS Assessor training. Today we are talking about preventing vicarious trauma. And what that really means is understanding the difference between burnout, compassion fatigue, and really recognizing what vicarious trauma is, how it differs, and how to recognize and prevent vicarious trauma in your own professional and personal life as well. So the housekeeping here, as you know, webinars are recorded and always closed caption. We do our best at SSF to get a thank you for attending email out before the end of the week. And hopefully you'll have that Thursday or Friday. The link to this recorded training, as well as all of our CAS Assessor trainings, can be found on our training page on our new and improved website. Of course, please feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions that you have. Because it's me, y'all, I will be holding the interaction in the Q&A until the very end. And if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. At the end of the training, I will get to them. And now we get to begin. So today, as I mentioned before, I'll describe the various the differences between vicarious trauma, burnout, compassion fatigue, and how to identify its emotional and physiological effects so that you can recognize these physical, emotional, and behavioral warning signs in yourself and in your coworkers and those in your life around you, even outside the workplace. Now, this training is meant to help you develop strategies for preventing and managing vicarious trauma with best practices, tools, and support. So before we get into the actual content, if you could drop 1 or 2 words in the chat and what your current experience is with vicarious trauma. I would love to know. We would love to know. So I'm not seeing any responses. There we go. Burnout, reactive. Okay. Maria, I felt that one. Emotional pain. Yes, Tracy. A lot for sure. Yeah. Present. I'm so sorry, Rafaela. Fatigue, dissociation, irritability. Yes, on that one. Frustration. Oh, Sarah, good one. Dissociation. I'm glad you're here. Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Helplessness, stress. Thank you so much. Thanks, Vivian. Sleep issues. Yes. Thank you for your input. I always know like these conversations when we get into the conversation around trauma, vicarious trauma, all the various levels of this work, sometimes it can feel pretty heavy. Today's training is not going to get into trauma, but it does get into behaviors, and we may have a moment like, oh man, they're talking to me, right? And you may start to recognize physical changes, maybe body temperature rises or drops, um, breath gets short, mouth gets dry, and you're like not really paying attention and focus just goes. Um, yeah, that happens. Please feel free to get up, step away from your computer, and know this is recorded, right? So you can come back to this work. So step out as needed, and we're going to move on. Thank you for your feedback, everybody. I appreciate it. Yeah. All right. We'll watch a short video that really kind of helps explain a little bit more. Short video, and we'll move on from there.
Through neuroscience, we understand that our nervous system is affected by stressful events. When you are a helper, which is a therapist, or for many of our clients, they're physicians or in other frontline positions, not only your nervous system is affected by stress, but your nervous system is affected by another person's nervous system. So you're working with someone who's just been through a traumatic event, is maybe seriously struggling with a trauma that's happened to them, and you're providing help. Your nervous system will get stressed as their nervous system gets stressed, and your nervous system will downregulate as theirs does. This is the sign of a really good therapeutic or healthcare relationship. You're connected. Some people describe this as empathy, right? That we can sink into another's lived experience and our body responds and our brain understands that this experience that I'm having is not my own, it's yours, but I'm with you. That can cause what we call secondary stress or vicarious trauma when you deal with it all the time. We not only teach the important self-care strategies here, through somatic interventions and things like mindfulness and yoga and sound bath and good exercise and cardio. But during the weekends too, when there's no formal therapeutic interventions, we're encouraging them to journal, write poetry, take those walks, and even just spend time by themselves to re-regulate. And we want our clinicians to do the same. If you don't understand the nuances of your nervous system and how it ebbs and flows and how it's affected by others, you develop longer-term stress conditions like PTSD, even though you might have never experienced a trauma firsthand. Just you being a helper to other people who have can impact your nervous system for the long run. Self-care strategies and teaching people who have never learned those is really key to preventing those long-term stress responses.
Good stuff, y'all. I'm curious. Can you? Oh, thanks for the emoji. I was just gonna say, I would love to know by any emoji if you practice self-care interventions when you are not at work. Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Like, yes, I'm so happy to see this. This is probably the fourth, yeah, maybe the third or fourth time we've delivered this content. And in the past, there's nothing. It's crickets, y'all. So thank you for sharing that. I'm so happy to know that we are taking care of ourselves. And for those who are like, I don't know what self-care genuinely means, um, aside from a massage or a bubble bath, right? We'll get into it. All right. So some terminology, vicarious trauma refers, this is really specific, to the changes in a person's beliefs, worldview, and emotional responses that are a result from repeated exposure to traumatic material. So that's different than a secondary trauma. And if you were with us last week, Quinn and I talked about introduction to trauma-informed practices. And we definitely got into the various types of trauma. We spoke at a very high level about vicarious trauma because we know we had this dedicated time to go a little bit deeper. And secondary and vicarious trauma often get confused, conflated, interwoven with each other. So here, I'll take another moment to reiterate vicarious trauma refers to changes in a person's beliefs, worldview, and emotional responses that are a result from repeated exposure to traumatic material. So there's a quote here on the screen that maybe some of you have already read while I'm chatting. But what's important here is the link that's on the bottom to a toolkit, which I think the more toolkits, the better, right? There are practices in there, more information in there to perhaps share with colleagues and maybe managers and directors and executive leadership as well. They may not have these tools. Oftentimes, you are on the front line providing these direct services, and sometimes they forget or they haven't been in your position. So I think it's really helpful to pass on this information to those who aren't in the training with us. Also, that little yellow bookmark has appeared in our series routinely as a reminder that this potentially, y'all, it's a question on the quiz. It's definitely a question on the quiz. And we're going to move on. So some workplace challenges, and this is where we get into the differences of what vicarious trauma looks like in our workplace and in our life as well. I've kind of broken it up into a few five different challenges that we see routinely, right? We talk about often PTSD. Your clients, I say our clients, I used to be in direct service for a short time. Our clients are most likely are showing up with this in their invisible backpack, right? We're all walking around with that invisible backpack full of stuff. And I think this kind of lends to the conversation for us as providers. This is what they're walking around with. And like the video talked about, when we are in direct service with people, oftentimes we have a tendency to take on that emotional backpack, the stuff that comes out in front of us while we are working with clients, right? So we understand that PTSD is part of the workplace. And without getting into it, it's defined here at a high level to support you. Compassion fatigue is often also confused with vicarious trauma. Compassion fatigue is a combination of physical, emotional, and spiritual depletion associated with caring for clients and significant emotional pain and physical distress. Anyone in crisis, right? Compassion fatigue is the unspoken exhaustion at the end of your workday, even though you sat at a desk, talked with people, right? Like physically, it's not exhausting until you sit back and like, wow, that was a day, right? The more we feel that and the more we do not support our nervous system to come back into a regulated space, the more the compassion fatigue builds up in our own body, in our own nervous system. Secondary traumatic stress is the consequent behaviors and emotions resulting from knowing about a traumatizing event, knowing about your clients' experiences without naming them, without getting deep into them. You don't need to know what DV is, right? We just know it is traumatic. And anyone that has been in this industry long enough, working with humans in general. We don't need to know the specifics for it to impact us each time it comes up. So I think, when we kind of step back and think about these different categorizations and understanding how this all feeds up into our own lived experience of vicarious trauma, it's helpful to have these little areas of like, oh, yeah, I kind of noticed after this particular client, whew, I need to take a breath. I need to step outside, right? These are just things to start to connect with if you haven't already. So burnout is a combination of physical, emotional, spiritual depletion, sounds like others, right? Associated with caring for clients. Moral injury is damage. This one's fairly new, and I just added it. Um, I'm always reading, learning, listening to continue to share information out. Moral injury is the damage done to one's conscience or moral compass when the individual perpetrates, witnesses, or fails to prevent acts that transgress one's own moral beliefs, values, or ethical codes of conduct. That's really nuanced, y'all. Moral injury is perhaps we find ourselves experiencing this when we are in an organization or in a role and we see that there's a disconnect, there's a misalignment of like, we're here to help people, but there's all these barriers in the way. But this is my role. I'm here. This is against what I believe, but I'm going to do the best that I can with what I have in front of me, right? This is kind of a micro example of what moral injury could be. I think it's a wide one. There's a lot of information there. If you're curious, I would say continue to do your own reading about moral injury, and then you might sit back and go, "Wow, okay, no wonder I'm exhausted. No wonder I need a day off every week." Right. So just sit with that and we'll move along. Again, please use the Q&A if you have any questions. All right. So as we are learning to understand the nuances of vicarious trauma, it impacts personal as well as professional. The impacts to the risk factors of vicarious trauma exacerbate, they increase as the more like we can go off and check these things, right, in our personal life as well as our professional life. If we are coming in, if we are coming into this work with our own traumatic history, our own trauma history, our own pre-existing psychological challenges. Don't love the word disorder, y'all. Perhaps we've experienced some of our own traumas at a young age and have isolated ourselves and really haven't resourced ourselves well enough. And we don't necessarily have an adequate support system. And of course, grief, these will increase our risk factors of experiencing vicarious trauma, right? These are increasing our risk factors of us experiencing vicarious trauma. So in our professional life, when we don't have a quality, when we don't get good training, we don't have quality supervision, and a high percentage of trauma survivors in your caseload. And I'll just disclose, if they are in your caseload, they are in their trauma, right? They are coming to you because they need support. They are in the middle of an active trauma, right? Maybe you are in this work and not feeling experienced enough. You're new to this work. Welcome. Thank you for being here. The your organization and your skills and your beliefs are not aligned, that for sure will kind of come back to that moral injury, right? Lack of professional support, peer and mentor support within your organization will increase your risk of experiencing vicarious trauma. Right? And of course, I mentioned before, training as well. So a little bit more about personal risk factors without getting too in the weeds on it. We all have our personal histories that draw us to social work, right? We don't go into this work to get rich, right? At least not financially. We're called to this. It's a calling, and I firmly believe it's one of the reasons I value each and every one of you always. Um, it is a calling, and it is this like tug and pull for a reason. Odds are the majority of us have had potentially close to lived experiences or just have had our own traumas that were like, okay, I'm going to step up and help people because this helped me. Now I want to pass it on, right? We all, I say we, I'm in this work too. We all have high levels of empathy. And that can also make us a little more vulnerable to absorbing clients' trauma, right? And when I say absorbing, energy is contagious. There is no denying that. So when clients are sitting in front of you, in front of us, there's no disconnect, right? There is that absorption of energy, and especially the tears are fallen for some of them, or the defended and anxious, and they're leaned back, and we're trying to get them to lean in. So this is all energy that we are absorbing as well. And for some, there's a difficulty in maintaining professional boundaries, which can lead to an over-involvement and increased emotional strain. I want to say it was last year. I got the honor of being in a big room, lots of providers, and there was a gentleman who said, I never stop. And my heart hurt for that person. And when he said, I never stop, I'm serving people 24/7. I answer calls at 3 a.m. I never close my laptop at the end of the day. It is always on. I am always in continuous service. I'm always on call 24/7. And I asked, do you ever take a day off? And he said, what is that? And for me, I went right to this, and I was able to recognize the rest of my interactions with him was like, okay, I see you. I see all of this happening at the same time, right? The cynicism, we're going to get into the characteristics, but I did see a lot of this work show up in the way he was communicating and the way he was passionately expressing all the work that he does in the community. It was very interesting. So professional risk factors and understanding vicarious trauma. Repeated exposure. Constantly hearing traumatic stories from clients can accumulate and lead to your own personal vicarious trauma, right? Heavy workloads, high caseloads, and demanding environments can increase stress and reduce the ability to process material effectively at the end of the day. And of course, organizational management. If there is a lack of organizational support and a lack of peer support and training, these will all lead to feeling overwhelmed. Michelle, I see your hand raised. If you could just drop your question in the Q&A and we'll get to it at the end, and I will do my best to unmute those with hands raised. We're going to move on. So the impacts of vicarious trauma is super interesting here. And I'm going to spend a little more time on this particular slide because it's really helpful to understand the symptoms for you to recognize in yourself and maybe your coworkers, right? These were some of the behavioral, the relational symptoms I mentioned when that gentleman told me I don't shut my computer off. I am on call 24/7 every day, right? I was able to see some behaviors and the way he was communicating. And it was like, okay, I need to make a visual representation of this. So when we look at this and we think about ourselves, I think there are 10 different components here to really kind of understand when you're sitting with a client, can you even notice if your pulse quickens or your breathing gets a little short or tightened? Right? For you, can you feel a sense of powerlessness, anxiety, depression, and I know somebody mentioned in the comments sleeplessness, right? And that's right here, our psychological, sorry. Personal moods get impacted. I used to work for another nonprofit in West Sacramento. And after I left that position, my family let me know I was not the happiest person at the end of my workday. I'm like, what, me? Right. My moods, I was irritable. I noticed an increase and a definite need for sugar every day. This was all vicarious trauma that was happening. And I teach and live this work, and it was happening with me, and I wasn't able to recognize it in the middle. It was when I sat back and just kind of self-assessed. I'm like, yep, they were spot on. I certainly was experiencing vicarious trauma. So your moods will shift. Maybe leaning into substance abuse, right? Your spiritual connection. You feel a sense of a loss of purpose when you were once driven, questioning, does this work even matter? Am I making an impact? Right. And then, of course, the cognitive changes that happens. There's a sense of hopelessness and a preoccupation with clients. There's that immersive over involvement that will happen, and cynicism. Cynicism is big. That's a big, huge red flag that I hear every time I work with communities outside of SSF that are frontline providers. When I'm in the room with housing problem solving, it's such a gift to get to be in that room, but I hear these things. I hear the vicarious trauma showing up in that room. So some relational symptoms to recognize if there's a lack of interest, if you've disengaged in the work that you're doing, if you've disconnected from friends and support systems and fun. Now, about your work performance, right? When you start to notice, oh, I forgot that. Oh, I forgot that. Um, Not meeting timelines, not completing the work that you committed to. Those are also flags to just like, okay, let me just sit back and kind of self-check here. When you're working too hard, right? When you work over the time that you are supposed to be working, or when you're not on the clock and you're thinking about your client when instead of being in a place of rest or with family and friends. Um, Hiking is a big one for me. I recognize that, I was hiking and thinking about my work. Red flag, right? Like, oh, but they don't need to be on the hike with me. Moral changes. We have a decrease in our effectiveness in the workspace. We become apathetic, really just, I'm here, I'm doing my thing. If it works, right? Apathy is a big one. Interpersonally, I mentioned before, we kind of detach and withdraw from coworkers. Our communication starts to falter a bit. We may think we're communicating clearly, and then when it's reflected back, you're like, nope, that's not what I meant to say, right? That's also one to kind of notice. And conflicting and impatient dynamic with your communication. That's also a really good one to notice in your own workspace, working with peers as well. If someone who usually communicates effectively, fluidly, is articulate and eloquent, and then they can't find their words, or they're impatient and short and just got to get it done, right? Again, these are things to recognize. And we recognize these in not necessarily just ourselves, but our peers, not as a way to judge, but as a way to show up with a little empathy, right? If for those of you that were on last week's training, the silver lining, we love this training video, the sympathy versus empathy, right? Sympathy to me separates. It's like, oh, so sorry that happened to you. When that happened to me, right? That's sympathy. I feel so bad for you. That's sympathy, right? Empathy is, oh, I know that emotion. I'm here for you. I'm here to listen. I'm so sorry you're experiencing this. That's empathy, right? So when that person that no longer can convey that empathy, that's a red flag for you. Understanding this work, we want to come back into a space of empathy for our peers. And the last one, of course, is our work-life behavior, just kind of showing up, overworking. It's very similar back to the work performance as well. I do see comments being added to the chat. As I'm working through this material, I am unable to look at the chat, but I will get to it when we're on our final slide. So impacts of vicarious trauma to an organization. We'll kind of move through this quickly because we definitely talked a lot about it in the previous slide. And these slides are really great to come back to and, of course, share with colleagues. Yeah, the loss of productivity. We touched on communication. Excuse me. And our quality of services will decline. Again, red flag, right? Like, hey, let me just check in with myself. Staff turnover is high. And of course, the impacts of vicarious trauma to an organization will ultimately lead to poor organizational health. They're collectively, the concentration is off, the focus, decision makings kind of become over, sometimes just become stagnant. Organizations can't make a decision because the staff turnovers can continuously happening and there's a loss of productivity, right? See how these all connect. Right? I do want to highlight, though, that trauma, vicarious trauma, can also lead to vicarious resilience. And I always want to highlight this term because vicarious resilience involves the process of learning about and overcoming adversity from the trauma survivor, right? From your clients. We can witness their successes, right? When they do what they say they're going to do and complete whatever it is that the two of you agreed to they would complete. There's this like resulting positive impact, like the celebration of even just, hey, here's my birth certificate, right? Like that's huge. It took a lot. They had to go through 5 different points to get one piece of paper to meet their timeline, right? There's a moment, there is resilience happening here, and it's this slow growth that leads to positive transformation. We can absorb that just as much as we could absorb the challenging parts of the challenging moments, the adverse moments. So vicarious resilience, I see it when I have the privilege of working with our trainers for housing problem solving. They are part of the PWLE, the People with Lived Expertise board that we do a lot of this work with as well. They appear in these training series as well. They are the resilience. And every time I get to share and spend time with them, I remember this is why we do the work that we do. So please keep that in mind that it's It's not all bad, y'all, right? We can grow from this as well. Yeah. So now we'll get into the joy of tech. My apologies, y'all. It's like on self. it's on it's on self mode. So, understanding and addressing vicarious trauma, I like to keep it simple with the ABCs, right? Summing it all up. Hope is not believing that we can change things. Hope is believing that what we do makes a difference. So these ABCs help us to kind of check in with ourselves. I said this multiple times. Becoming aware, we get to be attuned to our own needs, limits, emotions, and resources and heed all of these levels of awareness and sources of information. That was the big slide with the 10 different areas, the symptoms of vicarious trauma, right? Kind of a little self-assessment there for you. And also maintaining balance. This is how we address. First, we need to become aware. Then we kind of sit with, how do I create balance? And that will create a connection with ourselves. So if we keep it simple and don't overthink it, right? We just want to be aware. Are these things showing up? If they are, how do I create balance? And ultimately, that brings us into connection with ourselves so that you can prevent it happening again and again. That's the idea here. So let's talk self-care practices. I alluded to it at the beginning of the training, but I am curious if you want to drop in the chat, what does self-care mean to you? Support group. Thank you, Jamie. No, yeah, knowing when enough is enough. Thank you, Jonathan. Paddleboarding. I love that. Protecting your peace. Yes, Holly. Yes. Sustainability. Oh, these are good, y'all. Yeah. Mm. Going to get my nails and hair done, reading a good book. Reading a book. Yeah. Music. Yes. Morning coffee, Ruby. I'm with you on that one. Listening to music. Always in the background. Yes. Wonderful me time. Yeah. Singing. Yes. Thank you so much. Sometimes just laying in bed, past wake up time, and enjoying those first moments. I don't know. I want to make sure I say your name right. Todi, that's fantastic. Thank you. And Tracy, I know you've been doing this for a minute or two, having a daily self care routine and stick to it no matter what. That's a big one. No matter what. It's tough. It's definitely tough. These are all fantastic. Thank you so much. Journaling. Thank you, Holly. Yeah. The key for me is to switch activities for self-care. Painting. Oh, this makes me want to take a drive along the coast and listen to music. Thank you. All right. So clearly, we all get the full range of what self-care means. Um, and it's so personal. We all have our own favorites. I didn't hear any kind of movement. I mean, maybe somebody put taking a walk in nature. I, I've got movement practice here first for some personal self-care because she mentioned it back in the video. She mentioned somatic practices. Somatic practices is a high level of saying move your body, right? Move your body not to not to experience great muscles. I mean, that's lovely, but just move your body. It actually releases so much energy that we absorb in our workday. We don't realize it until afterwards. Of course, yoga is wonderful for that, but not the like fast, hardcore yoga, the more like restful, restorative, just laying on the ground and stretching or deep breathing. But a movement practice is huge. whether it's walking or running, a dance party, a dance party, 5-minute break. Um, I know one of my coworkers mentioned that in her corporate life that she picked it up from some of her coworkers that they would dance it out. And if y'all know the reference, you know the reference. So here are some other ways that are self-care that aren't quite activity driven, right? And these are more introspective. Journaling, just sitting in nature. It doesn't have to be a hike or a walk, just being outside, putting your feet in the grass, um, just kind of taking a moment and observing the sunlight and breathing in, looking at the clouds and the colors of nature. Just that alone is really nourishing for your nervous system. Also, celebrating the wins of your clients with your coworkers, not just necessarily with your client, but continuing to repeat these celebrations creates a neural connection in your brain that you will defer over time. This is over time. You will defer to the celebration instead of what's not working. So it's a little bit of like creating a groove in your brain to celebrate the win, celebrate, celebrate. This is self-care, right? We could look at what our clients didn't do, or you can look at what your clients did achieve. And the more we celebrate, the more our attention and focus will go to the celebration. This is a really good one, and it's so simple to do. Yeah. Mindfulness practices, I think we've all heard of those. And of course, self awareness, just a self moment of check in. How am I feeling today? What do I need? Do I need more water? Do I need to stop and eat? Right? Professionally, knowing your boundaries, working with a group and asking for support, whether it's from peers or management. Yeah, I think asking for support, if we don't do it in our personal life, odds are we're not doing it in our professional life. So they kind of go hand in hand, right? And we want to ask for support in the way that you hopefully want your clients to ask for support, right? So I think that's a professional one to just kind of like, let me practice this. And y'all, you can take these one at a time and start to integrate them into your workday and into your personal life afterwards. Schedule breaks between meetings. That's a big one. Take mental health days if you can. I want to recognize that if you can. Yeah, restructure your goal setting personally. Um, how much work and deliverables. There are days when I have the honor and privilege of working with Sacramento Steps Forward. I can communicate on days that or weeks that I cannot meet my timelines. I recognize it's a privilege. And my team, our organization is very respectful of that. But if I don't ask for it, I won't get it, right? So asking for support is a big one. Discuss your work style with your coworkers and your peers. Requesting things in writing. Can you slow down and repeat that, please? Right? Instead of being challenged in the workplace, discussing how your work style flows is self-care. Right? When there was a new team member that came into our department, that was one of our conversations from like day one. What is your favorite way to communicate? We've got 5 different ways to communicate. What's your default? Right? So it's those small things that are professional self-care moments. And of course, professional development courses, personal and professional. Our professional development courses, there's so many free ones that will definitely feed and nourish for self-care, kind of like this one. So I did mention in the previous slide, celebrate, right? The celebration will help keep the momentum going, and what you focus on grows. So it's human nature and a biological survival need that points the brain for ways to survive. So we naturally look for danger. We naturally look for what's not working. So sometimes it's a little bit of an effort to focus on what is working. So if you want to drop in the chat, I would love to know how you celebrate small wins. Hmm. Yes, Isabella, that was a Grey's Anatomy reference. How do you celebrate the small wins? Take myself to a movie. Oh, Sandra, I love that. Getting a new plant. I hope you are covered with plants everywhere. Hike, a happy dance with clients, and Tracy, of course. Of course. I could totally see that. Video games is fun. Yes. Family and friends. I like that. Getting another book. Wonder, oh, gospel music. Yes. Meditation, reading, and prayer walks. Thank you, Tanaya. Tanaya, I hope I say your name right. Food and drinks out with hubby. A smile. Yeah. Happy dance with my coworkers. Wonderful. I'm glad to see. Spending time with friends. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin, Linda, Teresa. I appreciate your feedback and input, adding your voice. Thanks. All right. So, some self care basics. Right. Rest. I love this acronym. This is inherited work. This is really cool. The acronym definitely is kind of a pause. It's a pause, right? Reaching is a time. Do I need to reach out to peers, a counselor, therapist who can make space to process, right? Sometimes our coworkers are just, they're living it too, and they need that something outside of our professional space as well. This is a big one. Excusing yourself and setting boundaries. This was the disclosure we started the training with. I started the training with, right? Like, hey, if this is starting to feel uncomfortable in your body, please step out. That is setting boundaries, right? Seeking out support from loved ones who are able to make space for you, and of course, taking time, space, rest. The acronym is helpful for those who like acronyms. Somebody mentioned in the comment mindfulness, practicing mindfulness daily. I think this image is very popular and it's very helpful. Mindfulness practices on its own is a very sensory driven meditation practice. It can be done with eyes open. This isn't a quiet everything, have no thoughts. It's really just observing what's in your environment, accepting what it is, with no expectation to changing it. Yeah. Mindfulness daily practices help us to be present without expectations. That's a hard one, but it's a great practice. And it's really an easy one to implement. We've got some links lower in the next couple of slides that you can download an app to learn mindfulness. These are journal reflections that were provided by Quinn. Quinn, who usually is sharing in this presentation work, but this is his donation to all of you. These are journal reflections. These are prompts that you can use. And I know he likes to speak about how journaling is a really great self-care tool that you can come back to see how much you've grown from certain moments in time. I like that feedback point. Yeah. So those are yours. You'll get a copy of this presentation as well as the recording. Yeah, then I will say breath work is really helpful, but this particular breath work, the box breathing, you breathe in for a count of 4. You hold your breath for a count of 4. You exhale for a count of 4, and then you stay empty for a count of 4. Simple, right? It's a box, 4, right? 4 parts to it. I will tell you that some people find this to create anxiety in their nervous system. So use this wisely. right? When some people have said, I don't want to hold my breath, I'm already anxious. Like, yes, I agree with you. And then there are some times where this isn't really meant to address anxiety, it's really just meant for grounding and to become present and to just quiet your mind a little bit. Yeah. There's a sheet here for acupressure for stress relief. These are different points within the body. I don't know. You can drop an emoji or share an emoji if any of you practice acupressure, self pressure points for stress relief. This isn't something I've ever tried, but I'm curious. Every time this slide comes up, I'm like, maybe I should try it. This one, the hand on the soft part right here. Yeah, this one I've known for a long time. I think I learned that one in elementary school, y'all. Yeah. And moving on, here are the apps that I think are relevant and helpful, and they're all free. So I wanted to make sure I was able to find some free resources for you. I do want to talk a bit about Smiling Mind because it's very unique in that it's not just guided meditations that you can play, it's not just nice music or storytelling. It's actually has some really unique features that are age appropriate. So if you work with maybe transition aged youth or even younger, you've got family that you work with, this particular app is really helpful to pass on to clients as well if they're open to receive it, as always. Right? But even if you've got small ones in your home, this is a really great app, the Smiling Mind. And as I mentioned before, you've got links here, which will be active when we share the presentation. And as usual, as asked, is requested by you, our summary slide to keep it all in check. Vicarious trauma is emotional impact from others' trauma. Burnout is exhaustion from prolonged stress. Compassion fatigue is stress from helping those in distress. And the effects could be anxiety, depression, intrusive thoughts, and numbing behaviors. Recognize the warning signs. Physical are fatigue, headaches, sleep issues. Those are the most popular. Emotional is the irritability, mood swings, and hopelessness. Behavioral, social withdrawal. Social withdrawal is a big one. And my introverts know. The introverts know. Right? Decreased productivity, substance abuse. Prevention and management are some best practices as listed throughout our slide deck. And that is the conclusion of this work. We do have 5 minutes. I am going to stop sharing screen and I think, oh, thank you, Erica. This is the best information. Appreciate. Yes, Kelly, the slide deck will be sent out along with the recorded link as well. Thanks, Yvonne. I appreciate it. I do want to make sure that I guess somebody answered our Q&A. There's a secret Sacramento Steps Forward account logged in that I guess was addressing the questions. Thank you again, everybody. I truly appreciate getting to be in this space with each of you. And please tune in next week. The training will be Introduction to Conversational Case Management. And that we also touch within that an introduction to the 5 steps of housing problem solving. So it's a really, really wonderful presentation that will be delivered by Monisha, who is in our case conferencing team, as well as Daryl Rogers, who is part of, he shows up in so many capacities with SSF and community, and he will be presenting as well. Daryl is our also very well trauma informed, and brings that approach to the training as well. Yes, we do love Daryl too. Thank you again. And if you have any additional questions, please email trainings@sacstepsforward.org. And please complete the survey on your way out. I will always read all the comments, and this is how we improve the trainings for you. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the hearts. And for those of you that are attending Housing Problem Solving this week, I'll see you there. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you.